Does the acute supplementation of carbohydrates prior to a workout really matter? It does, and we've been looking at this, and there was a study that helped us understand exactly how much to have, and it was very illuminating. If you were to eat carbohydrates right now, right this second, would it affect your workout tomorrow morning? It would make sense logically that it would, but let's break down this research a bit more.
I popped a link down below for Creatine Gummies, 50% off of them. So after today's video, check them out. 50% off allulose sweetened gummies. These have 1.5 grams of creatine per gummy. So it makes it so you can low dose your creatine. You're talking about getting in shape for summer, might make some sense. Helps preserve a little muscle mass by keeping your strength high, even if you're in a caloric deficit. There's countless bodies of research when it comes down to creatine. So I'm not blowing any smoke. The stuff is legit. But the little gummies make it easy to sort of microdose creatine throughout the day. So I find I don't get the water retention that I would get if I were to just drink like a 5 or 10 gram bolus of it at one sitting. Not to mention 50% off is pretty darn awesome. So that link is in the top line of the description underneath this video. Their new sour apple flavor, holy smokes, especially with no added sugar in it, off the charts.
19 studies were looking at the acute load of carbohydrates. So that ranges from having carbohydrates today to see how it impacts your workout tomorrow, all the way up to having carbs 15 minutes before your workout. And we know that carbs are energy, it's glucose, right? So it would make sense that there's fuel. But when you look at the literature, they actually found that there was no significant difference between loading up on carbs the day before compared to not. Now, at first, this sounds like complete hogwash. It's like, that can't be the case. This is probably some low carb manipulated study that's just selectively picking literature to review. No, this was a systematic review that was not a narrative review, which means they looked at all literature. But what does this actually mean? How do we explain this? Because I want to get to the bottom of it. I want to understand, how do I get the most muscle growth? How do I get the most strength? How do I get the most performance out of my workout? And if that means I need to have 50 grams of carbs today to do that tomorrow, damn straight, I'm going to have the 50 grams of carbs, but now I'm confused. Where they did find that there was improvement in performance was when the volume was higher. So the problem with a lot of studies that we look at is they're not looking at athletes. Sometimes I feel like they might get myopic, right? You're not looking at real world application. You might be looking at knee flexion strength, or you might be looking at a 1 rep maximum here and there, or you're looking at these data points that you know are important, but it's not practical where I'm Thomas, I'm gonna go work out for 75 minutes today. Tomorrow I might work out for 90. The next day I might work out for 30 in the morning and then go do a bunch of pull-ups in the evening. It's all over the place, right? So where we do see, and I have to make sure I mention this, where there is an added benefit to having carbs the day before or just prior to, is when you know you're gonna have a higher volume workout. So let me explain how this kind of works. Your muscles store glycogen. Do you think that there is an increase in your performance, your strength, if you have 50% of a tank or 100% of a tank? Does your car have more horsepower if it has a half a tank or if it has a full tank? So there's a very big difference between being 50% storage and 100% storage. There is a very good chance that you're not depleting all your glycogen. So there's a very good chance that you do not need to have additional carbs the day before or just prior to a workout, because your glycogen stores are fine as is. Now, this study did much more of a deep dive into glycogen depletion, and it had 4 different categories, but we're talking directly. If you were to go work out right now and had 50 grams of carbs, would you have an increase in performance? Well, one of the studies they analyzed in this was so interesting because it took a look at carbs prior to a workout versus water. The carb group had a huge increase in squat performance, a noticeable increase, maybe not huge, but noticeable increase in their squat performance. The water group did not. Next, they tricked that water group and they said, hey, we're giving you some carbs. So they gave them a sweet beverage, and they told them it was carbs and it was really only a couple calories. What they found is that their squat performance now went up and was almost equal to the carb group, which tells us that sometimes there is a psychological effect. And I like carbs just as much as the next guy. So I'm not coming here to attack your carbs. I'm just being very real that maybe the signal that we get from carbs as like a signal of, I got my fuel, I got my glucose. Maybe that makes us feel so good that we actually do get a psychosomatic effect. So much so that we can trick ourselves into it. And Dr. Tim Noakes has even talked about this. Like he's done maltodextrin rinses in the mouth, swishing around carbs in the mouth, and he finds that performance improves. Now, what's interesting is out of the 19 studies that were looked at, 8 of them did show improvements in performance when carbs were added. 8 versus 11, not that much of a difference. Here's the thing. Out of those 8 studies, the groups that had carbs that had better performance had significantly higher calories than the other groups. So what this is meaning is that when the calories were actually matched, you ate 2,000 and I ate 2,000, whoever had more carbs didn't really make a lick of a difference. But if you had 3,000 calories and I had 2,000 calories and you had more carbs than me, you probably would perform better. If you had 3,000 calories and I had 2,000 calories and we both had the same amount of carbs, you'd probably perform better. So what we're seeing is that calories seem to kind of trump carbohydrates in a lot of ways, as long as your glycogen stores are filled or partially filled. So as long as you have enough onboard carbohydrates, the next determining factor is really your calories. So eat enough the day before. Now, as someone that is experienced with fasting, my workout today was a slog. It felt like I was just dying because my caloric intake yesterday was probably 1,200 calories where it should have been 3,500. And I had carbs. So carbs are not going to override sort of your caloric needs. So the reason that I mention this is that stop stressing out about your carbs pre-workout. If your carb intake is enough over the long haul, you're fine. If your carb intake is super low over the long haul, you might need to change some things, and then maybe some carbs would help, but that's probably not the case. As always, keep it locked in here on my channel. I'll see you tomorrow.